Is King Harald the dumbest character Oda has ever written?
Yes! Yes!
And no. I'm willing to bet the conventional wisdom about King Harald after chapter 1168 is that he was pretty fucking dumb, but that analysis is too surface level. Harald wasn't just a king who made bad calls. He deliberately built an entire political identity out of the belief that Elbaf needed to be morally cleansed. He fundamentally reshaped the Giants' ideology from the ground up, initiating Elbaf's pacifist era. This calculated, radical step is exactly what makes his later decisions look so much worse. He was the ideological architect of his own nation's eventual downfall, a consequence we are currently witnessing. Though it doesn't really take a genius to understand that making a deal with the world government is basically, literally making a deal with the devil. I think it all comes down to pure desperation, which convinced him that diplomacy, compliance, and even offering himself to be a slave would earn Elbaf protection and legitimacy. It was a devastating cocktail of straight up naive idealism, a total political misread of how the world actually works, and a massive dose of deep personal emotional projection. Personally, I don't think he necessarily trusted the world government because he believed that they were the definition of good. He trusted them because he needed them to be Elbaf's moral voucher. But let's unpack the pivot point in all of this. Harald's best friend, Rox, and how Harald turned his back on him at a dire time. The God Valley incident. But here's the truly devastating part. The psychological aftermath of Harald's tough call. When Rox went down, Harald didn't just move on. He convinced himself that his inaction was the weapon that helped kill the one person who actually believed that together they could challenge the world to make it a better place. Think about that for a second. That is the nuclear core of his guilt. You gotta understand, the colossal personal guilt he had then metabolized into the national shame over Elbaf's history of violence. So what does he do? Instead of confronting his failure regarding Rox, he externalizes it. He throws all that guilt onto Elbaf. That means his entire pacifist push was less about being a political genius and way more about self-punishment. He genuinely thought that throwing Elbaf into full cooperation would be a 2-for-1 deal, clean the slate for the Giants and wipe away his own personal sin. This is why his decisions looked totally brain-dead and naive. They weren't rooted in logic, they were rooted in pure tragic emotion. And I want to be fair, he wasn't stupid, but his actions were absolutely barbecue chicken, just cooked. I don't think there was a single person who would disagree with that assessment. Oda constructed these tragic decisions for a crystal clear narrative purpose, setting up a huge thematic discussion about moral choice versus political reality. His misguided choices are the patient zero of Elbaf's entire present conflict, which means his apparent dumbassery was the required first step in Imu's objective to turn the Giants into literal warrior demon slaves. Harald is just one part of Oda's larger thematic architecture. The real question isn't about him, it's about the tragic pattern. Across the entire story of One Piece, we keep finding these tragic idealists, rulers whose failure stems from a lack of self-awareness. People like Oden, King Cobra, Gonfall misread the system, assuming their nice and neat moral code applies all over the place, expecting grace from the machine built only to conceal its corruption and darkness. It is a recipe for pure calamity. I think Oden serves as the clearest parallel to Harald amongst these examples. Oden was a straight-up beast in battle, but his political game was just an absolute flop at the box office. He fundamentally misread the room with Orochi and Kaido. He was so caught up in his personal code that he thought these two actual demons would honor a 5-year deal. That idealism was his Achilles heel, and they weaponized it to not only seal Wano's fate, but Oden ended up looking like a Magic Mike clown stripping for pocket change. With Cobra, his miscalculations were more sophisticated, and we can look at a couple of errors. First, he deadass wrote himself a death sentence by putting his faith in the Gorosei, believing he could ask that Lily question and walk away clean. Secondly, he was way too focused on his morals during the Alabasta drought crisis, as he refused to use dance powder on principle because he knew it meant stealing rain from neighboring towns. It was basically GG when Crocodile set up Cobra, planting the dance powder at the palace to make everyone think that the royal family was keeping all the rain. I mean, congrats on having a moral high ground, but from the perspective of the starving rebels, they were like,
Hey yo, what the fuck?
His refusal, combined with Crocodile's manipulations, compelled the rebels to spark a civil war and destabilize the country. Then you have leaders whose failure was less dramatic, less explosive, but way more foundational. Take Gonfall, for example. His mistake was failing to grasp that maintaining order isn't really much the same as maintaining justice. He allowed deep-seated discrimination and resentment to totally rot the place from the inside, believing peace could be negotiated without uprooting the underlying colonial justice of Skypiea. He completely underestimated the sheer depth of being a racist piece of shit. And then there's Harald, the symbolic outlier. Yeah, I know it's weird to bring him into a discussion with kings, but I think he represents the purest idealism that ends up being the backbone for the now Sakura kingdom. But his fatal error, which led right to Wapple's trap and his death, wasn't a lack of compassion. It was his gullibility and total lack of critical judgment when it came to saving the 20 MDs, which they didn't need to because they were pretty Gucci. Whether it's the large-scale political catastrophe of Harald, Oden's personal failure, or Harald's individual naivete, the root problem is the same: an idealism that lacked a critical edge against corruption. The math is undeniable. These kings believed their morals equaled political protection, but unfortunately, no, you can't just reshape corruption without using leverage, confrontation, or demanding systematic change. Their downfall is the exact catalyst that gives the next generation the motivation and the justification to take a radically different path, and that spine connects the entire story. Bottom line is that these guys totally struck out because of their big, shiny idealism, just got absolutely pulverized by a system literally engineered for structural abuse. But that's the beauty of those failures. They're the spark that lights the fuse for the next generation, the true execution of inherited will. Just like you liking the video and subscribing to the channel if you're enjoying this discussion. That's why we're putting people like Momonosuke, Vivi, Chopper, and Loki on the same level. Momo, Vivi, and Chopper totally held onto the core ideal, but they completely sidestepped the previous generation's messy compromise game plan. They're just straight up refusing to negotiate with stuff that's just fundamentally broken. It'll be the same with Loki as he reconciles with Harald's legacy. And I bet Oda is gonna write Loki handling that like this. He inherited the mandate to break the figurative chains his father tried to rock, which was Harald's ginormous fuck up of trying to play nice with the world government's rules. I think this completely parallels the Elbaf prophecy that Loki would kill his own father, because that entire fate is just a result of Elbaf's own broken culture and environment. Loki's mission, therefore, would be to embrace his father's idealism while rejecting the accursed prince label the system created, the polar opposite of Harald, who accepted the violent ancient giant reputation and projected his own guilt onto it. That might not be a clear, tangible goal like finding a cure for all illnesses or opening Wano's borders, but that singular choice, in a sense, this is truly the concept of inherited will at its essence. The old generation tried to reform the system, but the new generation is here to call bullshit on that system. True change means dismantling corrupt structures, and that's why Luffy is the ultimate successor. That's why he's the main character in the first place. He synthesizes everything: decisiveness without cruelty, compassion without naivete because his EQ is off the charts, and rebellion without being blackpilled. He is the logical culmination of every single correction made by his generation. And that's why I think the eventual reveal of Loki's Devil Fruit is so crucial in regards to Harald's development during the God Valley incident, which I talk about in this video here.